Self-trust is the secret weapon to living a reality that you desire. If you cannot trust yourself, you will always be too scared to live a life on your terms. Instead, you will default to living a life on everyone's terms but your own, which will never ever fulfill you. Most of us, when we come down onto this physical plane of existence, we're so bombarded with societal expectations, our peers, our family, everything around us, that we essentially split into two selves. Really, we have more than two, but for this analogy, we're going to say two. You have the you who dreams, the you who has feelings that certain things might be right, feelings that certain paths might be for you. This is the intuitive you, the feeling you. You could say the you that leads with your heart. And then you have logical you. If you look at these two people, I don't know how to annotate logical with like a little thing, but this is heart-led, this is logic-led. If you look at these two versions of you, when you think about which one, how do I say this? Which one do you think is closer to the energy of God? Which one do you think is closer to the energy of the divine? Which one do you think embodies higher frequency, lighter emotions? The intuitive version. But most of us, when we come down into this physical existence, we're programmed a lot with fear-based beliefs that are put into us by our parents and by our peers and by everyone around us. Not realizing that those are not ours to carry. We don't have to carry that program for our whole lives, but we do. And we willingly or non-willingly or ignorantly, maybe consciously, maybe unconsciously, we make decisions, especially in our teenage years, especially in our early 20s, we make decisions with this logical self who has been programmed with fear-based beliefs on what's safe and secure and what makes sense to do and be in this world. Usually at the betrayal of this intuitive, heart-led version of us. So this is kind of the inner voice that tells you to do things that maybe aren't so logical, maybe don't make sense to anyone around you, but you feel an intuitive draw to these things, even though based on the information that you've been given since you came here, it doesn't make sense. The reason you feel the draw is because it's a clue that going down that path will have you tapping into higher frequency energies and emotions. If we look at this version of you as closer to God, as closer to those higher frequency emotions, which is God energy, God level consciousness, then you can assume that if you were to actually listen to this version of you, what would follow is more of those feelings, more fulfillment, more wholeness, more oneness. But unfortunately, when we come here in this dense, polarized reality, we get tricked by reality into thinking that we must follow the rules set for us. And then this leads to this self-betrayal. So as we make especially big life decisions that cause us to betray this heart-led version of ourselves, we become fragmented. We come out of alignment. We get very far away from our true nature. You can think of this version of you as your true nature. And the further and further you get away from that by following what's rational, what's logical, by following other people's values, the more difficult you're going to find it to do even the most simple things, even the most basic decisions. So I've obviously experienced this. I've obviously thought about this a lot. A lot of people have experienced this. I think so many of us experience this and we don't even know how to verbalize this, and we don't have any idea how many of us deal with this. And I had this experience where I was growing up and there were certain values that my family had. There were certain things that were deemed good and bad. My mother always told me I should be a doctor or a lawyer because that would make me money. And that was her mindset. And there was a scarcity mindset that was within that was pushed onto me because she wanted me to feel secure, because that was the advice she would probably give herself in my shoes. And this is how we go about life. We take advice from people all the time. We naturally need to, as we grow up, until we're in our teenage years, we do rely on our parents to teach us how to live so we can survive. That's fine. That's not a bad thing. But it gets to a point where this identity, this dreamer self, starts to get really bogged down by having to make big life decisions. So when we're 18, we have to decide what we're going to actually do with the rest of our life, not knowing that the degree that we pick, whatever we choose to do, usually involves a commitment of the rest of our life spent working on this thing. And so our 18-year-old brain will heavily be influenced by our parents, by our peers, by our friends, by what we know to be a good, solid choice. And this is what happened with me, big time. So I had these beliefs instilled in me for a long time that I had to do something that was secure and guaranteed to make me decent money, okay? And I knew I could probably do anything that I set my mind to. I was lucky to have that belief instilled in me. So I tried to do science, I didn't like it. And then when I had a bit of a crisis when I was 18, I did a science degree for half a year, and I withdrew from the degree because I realized and had a bit of a panic, like, oh God, I don't know where I'm going to go with this. And as I withdrew, I was getting a lot of pressure, like, what are you going to do? You need to go back in. You can't just not go to college. You have to go to college. And I was like, oh, okay, I have to go to college. Panicking. I had this feeling, this intuitive feeling that something wasn't right with the options before me. I had an intuitive feeling that I wanted to study psychology. As I expressed this feeling, it was really mostly shut down. Again, not from any negativity or any intention to do me harm. It was an intention to protect me. But the people around me were saying this. They were saying, well, it's not as good a career path as this would be. You would make more money doing this. You would be more successful doing this, essentially. And so, although I had this itching feeling to go for the psychology, to study psychology, I eventually, after being told that it wasn't good and I wasn't going to have a good career from that and I wouldn't be stable and secure from that, I then decided, okay, I'll go with what's logical and I'll go with what makes sense. And I decided to study law. Do not get me wrong, I liked law. I enjoy law. I enjoyed my job as a trainee solicitor or a pre-trainee solicitor. I enjoyed learning about different case law. I enjoyed learning about the legal system. I definitely gained a lot of good skills. I'm grateful for that journey. I don't know if I'd be who I am today without it. I probably wouldn't be. But I dedicated 4 years doing a degree where I constantly felt fragmented, wondering if there was something wrong with me. Because yeah, I enjoyed writing the essays, I enjoyed studying the cases, but I did not see myself in this career as this being my life's work. And that caused a splinter internally in me where I couldn't understand why other people in college loved going to lectures and loved doing all this stuff. I felt like I did not identify with them. I felt like I was in the wrong place, and I constantly kept pushing that feeling down because I wanted to do right by my family. I wanted to do right by myself for choosing this, and I knew I could do it if I set my mind to it. I set my mind to it and I did well. But I always had this feeling of fragmentation within myself, unfulfillment within myself, and a feeling of being lost. And so eventually during lockdown, I had finished my degree. Everything was on pause. I wasn't sure about, going to apply for jobs or whatever. So I had, for the first time since before college, I had some time to think about my life. Obviously, we all did. We were all just sat at home. And I was naturally pulled right back into the world of self-development, psychology, philosophy, and I was obsessed. I fell way in over the deep end, more than I ever had before, learning about psychology and everything like that. And I expressed it again to another family member, and they kind of said to me, well, you've just done this degree. Why are you talking about this now? And that is good advice coming from them. Again, I kind of talked myself out of this yearning, this feeling, this itching, because it wasn't logical. It wasn't logical. On paper, according to my circumstances and the fact that I had just done a whole degree, it didn't really make sense. And so that was good advice that I got, but that was advice that was good for maybe the person that gave me the advice. That was advice that was good when you looked at my situation objectively. But if you were to climb in my body and think about it subjectively and how I felt in the core of my being and in my soul, it wasn't good advice. None of it was good advice, because when I look back, I could see that I knew from the beginning that this was what I was so drawn to this whole time. All my free time, I was obsessed. And I couldn't let myself admit that. After I had expressed it enough times, I had expressed it to someone I knew, a friend of mine, not a very close friend. I kind of didn't want to say it too much to my close friends in case it kind of didn't make sense, because I felt like, you know, it did sound silly and I didn't really have a plan, so I just kept talking myself out of it. I expressed it to someone that I knew, and they kind of shot me down again, being like, that's not really a career. Like, how would you even make money? People don't make money from that. Oh, you know, those life coaches, and they're this, this, and this. And so I put it away in a box again. And then I had another situation where I wanted to start making content, and I expressed it to an ex-partner of mine, and they were like, I said, oh, I want to make something about like how to handle emotions or how to handle a breakup. And they're like, that's stupid, that's not going to do well, you shouldn't do that, you should do this instead. So I continue to listen to this stuff. I continue to listen. And at this point, I decided, okay, I am going to try to have a go at this career that I'm after studying so hard for so long and getting my degree in. Got the job. And I was going to work. I was like, I loved, you know, being a corporate girl. I loved living where I lived. You know, I liked having projects to work on. There were elements of the work that I liked, but I felt so not myself. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. So even though I kind of knew this, it's kind of like, it's a situation, and we're going to get into this in a minute, but it's a situation where you do lie to yourself. So you try to pretend it's something else other than this big thing that you're betraying yourself on, because we push this. Our minds are very powerful, and they're really good at taking these things, these internal conflicts and these internal betrayals, and compartmentalizing them and storing them away, so we kind of forget what it is that's even making us feel fragmented in the first place. So I had a go at the law. I do not regret it. I learned so much. It was so incredibly challenging, and it taught me so much about myself and about the profession. And most importantly, it taught me that it was not right for me. And my intuition had been correct from my very first year of that degree. But at least now I had my answer. So maybe in hindsight, I could have done a placement or something sooner to figure that out sooner. But as I kind of started getting stronger and stronger in myself, I began to admit to myself that, okay, this isn't right for me, you know? And as soon as I made that decision, it was like a weight came off. But I still couldn't admit that I had betrayed myself on this level. So I decided to start an online business that still had nothing really to do with what I wanted to do, but having my own business and being my own boss was a part of what felt intuitively right to me. So I took that first step towards trusting myself a little bit more. You see how this is going? And the more and more steps that I've taken on my own intuition, maybe I didn't just jump right in and do like my absolute big delusional vision dream thing that I've always kind of felt I wanted, but sounded crazy to even myself. I didn't just jump in there, but I started taking the steps towards becoming that version of me. So I started with starting my own online business. I started with quitting law. I started with telling my family that I was quitting law after all that studying. So brick by brick by brick, I started kind of knocking down all these things I had betrayed myself with over the years. And eventually, I finally got to a place where I was leaning more and more into my intuition, and I was showing myself that I was building trust with, like, in this self, in this version of me that's telling me to do things from my heart and from my intuition. And as my logical self, who was making all the decisions, slowly started detaching from this fear-based programming and instead leaning into all these little inner nudges and desires that this version of me had, a relationship of trust started to develop. And when that starts to develop, you access an inner well of power and creativity that you cannot access if you are only ever betraying that part of yourself. If our intuition, if the things that we love are our access to the divine, to God, then you can imagine the more we follow them, the more we're going to feel those things, the less fear we're going to feel, the less lower frequency emotions we're going to feel. And that's exactly how it goes. So as this started, I still had so much fear programming in me that I could only really do an online business that still had nothing really to do with this, but it was a step. And I had so much fear programming in me that I had so much scarcity mindset around that business. And I had to work through that. But the more decisions I made in line with this intuitive version of me, and the more that I just trusted the intuitive guidance that didn't make sense at all, like especially the little ideas and nudges that made absolutely no logical sense, those particularly, when I followed those, I got a huge surge of self-trust and a huge realignment. And that's the biggest thing I'm trying to say. So as you begin to follow your heart and your intuition and your feelings, you begin to come into alignment and fear drops off. So when fear drops off, let's say, for example, the business thing. When I first started business, I was so concerned about competition. I was so concerned about everything. Now, because I'm doing something that's coming from my heart and coming from a place of love and passion, I do not have any of those fears. I rarely ever feel self-doubt. I do not get distracted by any 3D, lower frequency, anything to do with this. Because when I do this, when I do these things that come from my heart, from my intuitive self, I am operating on such a high frequency that these lower frequency concerns, problems, difficulties, struggles, I can't see them. They're not visible to me. I can only see the good. I can only see the opportunities most of the time, obviously within reason. There's always duality, but it's like night and day. So when I compare following the dream-led self, the heart-led self, and the logical self, this is like pushing a boulder up a hill. This is like you keep working and it never feels right. Nothing you do can make it feel right. This is like expansion. So actually, this is a better way to say it. This is a very compressive experience. You become more and more constricted. You become further and further away from your true self, and your outlook on life becomes smaller and smaller and more dampened and constricted. Whereas this, the more decisions you make in line with this, your intuition, your fulfillment, your joy, the more and more expansive you feel, and the more expansive your perception of everything becomes and your experience of life becomes. It's like all these avenues for all these amazing things begin to open up when you start to follow this. So that's just a little anecdote from my life, because honestly, when I speak to people, so many people have a similar experience, and it's not something to be angry with yourself about, and it's not something to be angry with your family about, it's not something to be angry with your peers about. It's just something that you must learn and have awareness of, because some souls come down and they go on a path where, quite a lucky path, might I add, where, well, it depends on your perception, where their dreams, their fulfillment is actually within the what's the word I'm looking for? the constructs of what is perceived logical or what makes logical sense to most people. So let's say a traditional career like a solicitor, lawyer, some people that is their passion, and I obviously met those people, and I remember vividly I had a coworker and I asked him, this was the day I realized I'm doing something wrong. When I started my law job, I had a coworker, and one day he told me he was reading on the weekend, he was reading the Law Gazette, like this law magazine. And I kind of looked at him and I was like, you think about the law on the weekends, do you? And he was like, yeah, do you not? And I was like, no. And that really clicked in my mind. I was like, okay, there's something not right here. So some people, they come in, like there's nothing wrong with following things that society deems more logical, things that your family or peers deem more logical, or more things that make more sense, so long as it's what's fulfilling for you. But the conflict comes in when what you desire falls outside of that and you follow logic instead of following intuition. That's where the conflict comes in. So before I get into this some more, because we're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about how you can get your self-trust on level 1,000 so that your aura, your alignment, your clarity, your vision, and your vibration goes through the roof, because that's the only way. You need the self-trust. You need the self-trust in order for that to happen for you. But before we go into that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the subconscious mind. You know, that's my favorite thing to talk about. And I don't know if this would be a video of mine if I didn't mention the subconscious even once, but everything in our universe is a reflection of our subconscious mind, so we're just going to talk about it really quickly. And yeah, okay, so your subconscious mind dictates how you behave and show up in this world. It holds your paradigm, and it basically controls what you perceive and experience in life. So whenever your subconscious accepts an idea to be true, it will then go about using all the resources, all the information, all the knowledge available to it to make that a material reality for you, so you can perceive that because it's what it thinks is true for you. So it's always working for you. It's trying to streamline everything for you based on the information that you give it consistently. And how you convey information to your subconscious is through, some people say, repetition. Only repetition in thoughts that have emotions attached to them. So you must have awareness, first of all, that emotions program your subconscious. And whatever information is attached onto those emotions is what will be conveyed to your subconscious as a truth. So let's say, for example, you have a situation where you are holding a really strong belief in one direction, okay? So you want to say that this is a bad thing. This type of person is a bad person. Or I'm thinking about lawyers, so we're just going to use lawyers. All lawyers are sneaky and bad. But then you have one particular lawyer that you have an encounter with, and they do something so kind and so genuine and so loving and nice for you that it moves you to tears. You're so moved, you're so grateful, and you're so overjoyed. You only need that to happen once for that to actually shift your belief system subconsciously about lawyers in general. That was a kind of stupid example, but it was just what came to mind because we were just talking about lawyers. So you get my point. So I want you to think of it like a meter, and actually I'm going to have to draw this anyway. So let's say, for example, this is how to conceptualize this. This is emotion A, and this is emotion B. And emotion A has this information attached to it, and emotion B has this information attached to it. And this is the threshold. So you're thinking and feeling in your conscious mind. You're thinking thoughts consciously, and you're making decisions consciously, and those are generating emotions consistently. So you can either have one event that generates a huge emotional surge that breaches basically the threshold for it to go into your subconscious and rewire your belief about that thing. Or you can repeat the same emotion and information enough times that it reaches the threshold. Those are the two ways to do it. I'm not going to go too long on that. So basically, in life, we really are controlled mostly by fear. In this physical reality, fear is the controller. And there's a really interesting book. It's called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill that I was listening to last week. Oh, that's a weird book. I think I only listened to a few chapters and I kind of got the gist. But basically, he imagines he's speaking to the devil. And the devil is basically saying, he is not a physical thing or a physical being. He is just the kind of mental prison that people end up in when they are coming down into this physical reality. So if God is light, if God is where we come from, if God is source, light, love, abundance, opportunity, happiness, then the devil is the opposite. The devil is fear, scarcity, lack, poverty, all of that. And how the devil controls us, which is basically the 3D illusions, is through fear of poverty, fear of death, all these different fears. And so we really program our subconscious, which results in our experience of reality through our most primitive emotions, which is fear or love. We can say love, we can say fulfillment, we can say overwhelming happiness, right? And when you boil it down and you really simplify it, you can either have a life experience based upon fear, or you can have a life experience based upon fulfillment and happiness and love. I feel like there's not a strong enough word to explain that. I think that's because it's like a non-physical feeling that comes from God. So you can have an experience of fear, or you can have experience of higher consciousness fulfillment. And the reason I'm saying those are the only two options, first of all, when you think about people in the world right now, you have people who are doing things because they are in survival mode and they think they're scared of running out of money, they're scared of becoming ill, they're scared of not having friends, they're scared of not being accepted. And that's why they do everything that they do, if you think about it, really. And then you have people who are doing things because it's their passion. There's no in between. Even people that are doing something they kind of enjoy, they're probably only doing that thing because they're too scared to figure out what they really desire, or they just have a fear of, what was the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, they do it for a sense of security. They want to feel secure, which is also a fear-based desire because you're scared of poverty. And so if we can logically look at the world and how people show up and see that people that are really out there and they have these crazy ideas and success stories and they just go completely on their own path, they're following blind faith and blind passion. And then the people that are living kind of this matrix kind of template guideline life, they're following fear. Even if they don't feel physically scared, they're following fear-based values and fear-based beliefs. So this is why I wanted to break this down for you. If you're telling your subconscious constantly that something is important to you because you are scared of something else not happening, you're going to get a reality that is just laced with fear and void of fulfillment. And even if you do something that you like, but don't overwhelmingly love or aren't overwhelmingly fulfilled with, fear is going to win. Because let's say you do something, literally any job I've had, I've always found enjoyment in it, right? But my enjoyment was at 30%, okay? Fulfillment, happy. That was at about 30%. I was happy I could pay my bills. I was happy I was learning skills. That rhymed. I was happy I had really cool coworkers, all these things. I was happy to dress up as a corporate girl and live a corporate girl life. That was fun. I do miss that sometimes, for sure. But on the other side, because I'm only doing these things for fear-based reasons, fear is going to be stronger. And fear is going to program my experience of reality more than this is. So in order to bring about a life experience of happiness, fulfillment, and abundance, we must do the things that bring us those feelings. This is how people end up so far away from even knowing who they are or what they truly want. This is how people end up looking for meaning in everything but themselves and their own purpose. I'm not saying, by the way, that everybody has one big life purpose that's like clear as day, but we all have things intuitively that we feel drawn to more so than other things. And your ability to follow that feeling and follow that intuition and trust yourself enough to do that without external validation then makes that muscle stronger. It makes that trust stronger, so you can do that more consistently, and it makes your intuition much louder. So if you have a low level of self-trust, if you have a history of betraying your true nature for what's logical and what makes sense to other people, then you might find that you find it so difficult to make any decision without getting the opinions of everybody around you. You could be really hugely indecisive, really afraid to make big changes. So if you're scared that you won't be able to make a change, that means you don't trust yourself. You usually don't trust yourself because you've spent so long betraying yourself. Another symptom of this is you get caught up in meaningless quests, like I mentioned, and you might actually feel really much better and clearer when you're alone, but when you get around people with strong opinions or strong personalities, they sway you. And I found this pattern, and I noticed this pattern in myself. Thankfully, I had these situations happen so I could notice it, where I would get into relationships and I would kind of morph into the person that I was seeing. I started doing different things that they were doing because they were doing it and that's what they valued, and I wanted to value what they valued because I didn't know what I valued. And I didn't, even if I did on some level, it was just another self-betrayal. Because why? Because I was in the habit of betraying myself. It's a habit. So you develop the habit of denying your own desires. You develop the habit of relying on everybody else to set the path before you. And I had to consciously, in this relationship that I'm in now, I had to consciously stop myself from doing that again and remember what my values are. You should probably have similar values to your partner, but it's okay to have different desires. It's okay to have different passions. And that's what I mean, more so than the values, I should say. I was taking on my ex-boyfriend's passions, and I started taking on one of my current boyfriend's passions recently. And I do find it interesting, but it was coming at the cost of my own passion. And I finally noticed it and I said, no. Break the habit. It's a habit. It's a habit of listening to other people rather than listening to yourself. And this self-betrayal is so sneaky because it feels safe and it feels logical, but all you're doing is moving further and further away from your true self and your true alignment. And the more you move away from that, the more you feel like you're fighting in life because you've turned off your superpower. And your superpower is your intuition. And your intuition cannot switch on if you do not trust it. You must actually exercise it. You must put your faith in it in order for it to grow stronger, in order for it to show you that it can be trusted. So if we go back to this, I'm going to do the two. If we go back to this again, and we look at the two stick figures, we have intuitive and logical. Okay? And if we see that constantly you have spent your whole life betraying, so your logical decision-making self has spent your whole life taking on other people's values, desires, passions, and beliefs, rather than trusting your own intuitive, this leads to the overwhelming feeling of self-betraying and a lack of self-trust. So when you go to make a change or a decision, you don't trust yourself enough to make that decision. I want to reassure you, I want to get into how you can start building self-trust in a minute, but I want to reassure you, what's going to happen when you finally take this from betrayal, so you keep betraying this version of you, to trust. So this version of you is hurt, okay? And this is why people have internal conflict. This is why people have low confidence. This is why people feel this kind of self-hate and they don't know why. It's because this heart-led version of you, this version of you that wants for these things, feels betrayed. You can think of this almost like your inner child, but not exactly, but that's an easy way to conceptualize this. So your like young self, before society put anything on you, your self that is closest to source enlightenment energy feels hurt and betrayed because you're forcing it to keep living life according to dense reality's terms. And so this version of you is hurt, this version of you is betrayed. But what's going to happen as soon as you start actually listening to your intuition and your inner guidance system, and you start acting in accordance with your own values, beliefs, and desires, the most magical thing is going to happen. And I need you to know this because I wish somebody told me this so long ago. You're going to make a decision, maybe that makes no sense logically, but you're going to finally follow your heart and your feelings, and you're going to make a decision for yourself. You're going to show yourself some self-trust, and you're going to just go for something in blind faith. And what's going to happen is you are going to be shown that you were right to do that. You are going to feel it in the core of your being that it was aligned. And immediately you're going to feel the sense of relief that you've finally done something that makes sense for you and that's in alignment with your true nature. And immediately you're going to say to yourself, I was right all along. I was right all along. Especially if it's something big like what you're doing with your career or your work or whatever, a big life decision. When you finally follow your intuition and it makes no logical sense and everyone's telling you you're crazy, when you do it and you go into it, you're going to have a moment where you're like, I was right. I had no evidence except for my feeling, but the feeling was right. And as soon as you cross that threshold, it's so much easier because you know and have evidence that trusting yourself is the best path. It's the only path if you want to live a life of ultimate fulfillment. So as we are trying to rebuild self-trust here, we want to focus first of all on basically, if you have a lot of internal conflict that feels a lot like resentment towards yourself, and you keep making decisions that hurt you really, and you keep making decisions to betray yourself, the first step is to forgive yourself actually. So you kind of want to picture this version who's made all these decisions apologizing to the part of you that was hurt, the part of you that wasn't expressed. And I saw a video, I think it was the Ho'oponopono, I can't say that, but I've seen that spoken a lot about this ancient Hawaiian technique where you basically say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. And that was used in hospitals to heal people. Basically what you're doing, you say it to a person or you say it to yourself. And through doing this, you're taking accountability when you do it to another person. Through doing that, you're taking accountability for your perception of them. So this person, this practitioner of this technique did this in hospitals I think it was in a mental institute. Don't quote me on this. I read this a really long time ago. But he essentially, all he did to heal these people of a lot of their illnesses and mental ailments was he practiced this, where he apologized. He said, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And he took radical responsibility for his energy towards these people and his perception towards these people. And they began to heal because he stopped activating that in them. I think that's what the story went. But really, you want to kind of have this approach towards this part of yourself. You want to heal your relationship with this part of you that feels betrayed by you. So you can apologize, you can ask for forgiveness, and you can imagine this part of you saying, I forgive you. I forgive you. And that will do a lot of healing. Forgiveness is huge. If you have some resentments built up in yourself, if you feel like you're constantly letting yourself down, especially, and betraying yourself, you have to forgive yourself. You have to forgive yourself. Maybe you were young, maybe you were making career decisions when you were in your teenage years. You didn't have all the information that you have now. We're having this polarized, dense physical experience. This is part of the experience. So you don't need to hold that over yourself. It's okay that you fell into these different experiences. I call them traps, really, but they are just experiences of this physical existence. It is an experience and it's part of your journey. So find acceptance and forgiveness before you can move on to the next part. And even acceptance and forgiveness for anyone who maybe gave you advice that strayed you away, because they were operating from a level of advice that maybe they would have liked to receive in your situation. They can only give you advice from their level of consciousness. They can't give you advice on your level of consciousness. They can't give advice that's going to work for you because they do not know your consciousness, your intuition, your strengths, and all of that. So forgiveness and acceptance. Then you must actually get to know yourself. Let me write this down. So everything that's happened, no matter how lost you've gotten, you can let it go and forgive yourself. No matter how much you've betrayed yourself, you must accept it and let it go and forgive yourself before you can move forward in faith. So the next step after that is to actually understand, study, and understand yourself. A great way to do this is in coaching, counseling. Journaling is amazing for this. If you don't journal, oh my God, that is probably the best tool for all of this. Get to know yourself, get to know your desires. When you have a strong feeling about something, why do you feel so strongly about it? When you feel like you want something, write down, break down why you want that thing. If it's only because it looks good to other people and it might make you some money, dig deeper, find out the real reasons. You want to find things that basically, if you have something, right? So let's say you think you want something, okay? You want to do something. You want to study a certain subject and you want to study it because it's going to be a good career. Why is it going to be a good career? It's going to be a good career because it's going to give me security. Why is it going to give me security? It's going to give me money. Why is it going to give you money? It's going to give you money because it's a good field, da, da, da. And then like, why is that going to make you happy? Sorry, is the next question. Because I can do this and this with the money. Do you see how far away the happiness is from the thing? You can shortcut that and find the things that, why are you doing it? Because it makes me happy. Those are the things you want to look for, not because it makes me money, because it gives me status, and those things make me happy. I'm doing it because it makes me happy. That's how you find things. So you can find these things through journaling. Just examine yourself, question yourself, ask yourself why you do the things you do, why you act the way you act, why you feel the way you feel. If somebody is putting something onto you, ask yourself, does this align with your values? Your values in particular are really key. So what do you value? Do you value freedom? Do you value structure? Do you value having a structured office environment? Do you value being out in nature? Do you value spending time with friends? Do you value free time? What do you value? Once you figure that out, you can begin to prioritize what's important to you in your life. And when you actually do that, your self-trust is going to go through the roof. And you can do this with small things and you can do this with big things. So like changing career, moving country, big things, but even small things. So let's say, I'll give you an example from me. I was in a period of life where I was shifting from working one way and focusing on certain things to then focusing more on other things. So I was in a period of life where I went from focusing on certain things to focusing on different things. It became clear to me as my goals shifted and evolved, that I had to begin valuing deep work and creative flow if I wanted to create the things that I now want to create. So it was a value before, but maybe it came below like certain other values, right? But as I reassessed and really was honest with myself about what I really wanted more than anything, deep work made it to the top of the list. Creative flow and spending time like doing deep work on my passion specifically made it to the top of the list. So now, whereas before, if I was working on something and I had an opportunity to go to a certain class or be with certain friends, or something came up, I might have said, okay, I'll do deep work later. But now that I know deep work is my number one value right now, and it's always in flux, but right now it's number one. If somebody wants to do something, say, and I know I'm in the middle of my creative flow, I'm not going to do it because I'm prioritizing my values. And because I do that, and because even though it may not make sense to another person, because I'm doing things that show that I prioritize my own values and my own desires, my self-trust goes through the roof. This is how people become extremely powerful. This is how people become extremely magnetic. This is why I said self-trust is your secret weapon. People who act like this and live like this, they think and feel and know that they can do anything they set their mind to. They know who they are, they know what they want, and they know that they're going to get it. And when you build self-trust, that is exactly how you'll feel. And when you feel like that, the world is your oyster. It's so much fun. You start feeling more fulfillment, more joy, more happiness, more abundance, more confidence. Confidence really is the biggest thing. But it starts with forgiving yourself, then getting to know yourself, and then actually prioritizing the things that matter to you with your actions. You stop betraying yourself. And I don't even care if you need to start as small as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, I wasn't ready to go all in on like my big dreams that I had just been keeping so secret. I started making small steps. I started by challenging myself enough to show that I could leave a 9-to-5 and make money on my own. I started with going to the gym consistently. That was a huge thing for me because I wanted to show that I had structure and discipline and all these things. So I started with just building the characteristics of the version of myself who I kind of intuitively knew I wanted to become without diving headfirst. But if you do want to get to level 1,000 confidence, self-trust, and just have the most incredible, powerful aura in the whole entire world, the fastest way to get there is to do the big scary thing that you're most scared of doing, but the thing that is closest to your heart. That's the quickest way to get there. When you do that, nothing in life will faze you. I'm going to leave it there. I hope this video helped, and I'll see you in the next one.